Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Voice by Matt show. My name is Matt Bertho. I'm your host. And today I have my Scottish brother with me. We found out 25% here.
25 is good.
That's right. Lewi Gault, everybody. Welcome to the show, Lewi.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. I was just saying, your microphone looks so much cooler than mine does. We have the same mic, same setup, but I can't get mine to look as cool as yours. Maybe I need a different color cable.
Do you have the Rode PS1?
I don't know why I have. I have this
It's
thing.
the extender guy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You probably have
Anyway,
that.
I digress.
That's all right.
Look at it at the bottom of the screen. It looks funny.
It sounds great.
It sounds good. That's all we're here for.
That's all that matters. He's got his nice camera. He's looking good. He's getting ready for a giant freaking event in Nashville.
Yep.
We're both in the weeds of that right now, getting ready for that sucker.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's been an all-consuming, chaotic, exciting roller coaster that we've been on.
That started last November.
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, it's. I honestly like. I'm two parts excited, one part anxious just to get it over with. Quite, you know, that's where I'm kind of at with things. You know, like my love language or my happy place is to have like peace in my life and tranquility and just a little more calmness. And this event has been the opposite of that for me.
This event is the Atlas Alliance Summit in Nashville, September 6th and 7th at the Municipal. It says auditorium, but it's more like an arena. It's huge. But the pace of it that Lewi is talking about is this. And that's the pace that we're feeling.
For me, it's more.
Well, Lewi used to be a professional drummer, and so percussionist. So, you know, all the percussionist nerds don't get offended by me saying drummer.
Well, I was a drummer. I wasn't a percussionist.
Okay.
Yeah. So and yeah, you're right. There are two different camps, and I was not in the percussion camp. So
I played the drums also, and luckily, when I was in high school, they just started thinking about teaching us how to actually read music and read the bells and learn how to read the notes on the page. Because I just looked at rhythms. That's what I looked at. So Lewi and I have that in common. But Lewi is a great soul. He has an amazing story. And I've been wanting to get Lewi on the show for a while. And he was just like, yeah, let's do it. And let's do it a week before the craziness happens in Nashville.
It's more like just a therapy session. It's like, hey, let's just take an hour and just sit down.
So Lewi, this is about how you found your voice. And you have an incredible voice.
Well, thank you.
Give us a little feedback, a little origin story. Like, how did this all happen for you, man?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, how long you got? I'll give you the cliff notes. You know, obviously, I was born and raised in the west coast of Scotland, and
what was the city?
It was I grew up in a village called Langbank, which is just beside Greenock in Port Glasgow, which is on the west coast, about half an hour from Glasgow. So, where I grew up was right beside the town. It was a shipyard town. Port Glasgow and Greenock, they were the shipyards, and all the ships were built. They had QE2 and famous shipyards. But in the 70s and 80s, you know, Maggie Thatcher shut those down. So the place, like the whole town was employed by these shipyards, you know. So the place went into complete depression and became, when I was growing up, one of the biggest heroin capitals of the UK. So it moved from this, you know, kind of vibrant place where there was a lot of productivity, a lot of, you know, hope, like steady jobs, steady work for the families, you know, and it was working class, but it was steady, you know, to all of a sudden everyone's scrambling, hope was taken out the window, and desperation came into it. And, you know, I always tell people I kind of have a hard time going home a lot And we can get to that in a bit, but you know, it's because I still see it. You know, I feel like I almost kind of, it's the wrong phrase, but I almost escaped from there. So when I go back, I still see the same people drinking in the same pubs, doing the same thing, and I just feel I'm very, very blessed to have, for whatever reason, been put in a position where I'm now here. You know, so but yeah, that's where I grew up. You know, my parents are still there. They do a lot of work in the community. They do a lot of work with rehab centers, and you know, my dad used to take a bus up as part of his church into the red light district in the Glasgow city centre. And they would just open the bus up. There would be prostitutes, heroin addicts. They would just come on, have a cup of tea, sit down, chat with them. And, you know, eventually they would build relationships and rapport. And eventually, you know, those conversations would turn into people being like, listen, I need help. And they would redirect them to rehabs and stuff like that. Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
So what are the professions of your mom and dad? Like what
My dad's an architect.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. So my dad's an architect. My grandfather was a postmaster, so he worked for the post office all his life. My dad went to the School of Art in Glasgow and became an architect, and you know, was really successful, opened his own firm, and but he was just always, and he still is, connected to the roots, you know. And I think it's funny when you get older, right? Like now I'm 42, I have 2 kids. You know, my oldest is 12. And when you're 12, you don't really realize the lessons you're being taught, you know, because they're being shown to you. And now when I'm this age, I can look back and I'm like, oh, that's the lessons I was being taught. That's why I operate the way I am. Yep. So, yeah, that's what it looked like at home. It was really interesting, you know, because, you know, my dad did well and my mom as well. So, you know, we grew up in a nice home, in a good community, but we were never secluded. Like we were never like behind closed doors. It was always like, hey, we're going here to do this for these people. So that's the way I grew up.
Service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's why I love you so much, because your heart is so big, and you know, you're doing these amazing massive things with Atlas, and you're doing these amazing massive things with EXP, with your real estate stuff. Like, I mean, and you were a professional drummer, bro. Like, how did this happen?
Yeah, so I you know, there was always instruments in my house. My mom and dad were never big players, but there was always a piano, an upright piano somewhere around, you know, in my grandmother's house. There was a organ there, and there was always a guitar lying around. So my brother and I just grew up with that, just grew up with music. And, you know, like in the UK, especially, like in, you know, on the West Coast and a lot of the working class towns, like music is it. Like, and I know, you know, if people grew up in the same circumstances, like music was your hope. Music was your outlet. Music was everything. Like you grew up with the bands that you grew up with because they spoke to you and your generation, you know? So
yeah, I just saw you post something about Oasis.
Yeah, they just reformed. Like that was the band that changed my life, you know, like
wow.
Literally. And they just reformed after 15 years. So
how did they change your life?
Because you know, I think a lot of people, when you connect with a band, you know, my first band I connected with were the Beatles, you know, and that's how I learned to play the drums. But like the first band that really touched me when I was like in an influential age was Oasis. And it was just, I mean, and listen, I was a rascal, right? It was like cigarettes and alcohol, getting mad, like going out and getting heavy, you know, like, and that was like, cool. So that really shaped my teenage years, and it started to change who I was becoming and stuff. So yeah, they were the band, but they were the band that made me want to be in a band. And I was actually, that's so funny we're talking about this. I was just thinking about this in the car today. I was driving because I was thinking, man, I can't believe they reformed, and I'm going to go and fly home next year and see them. But because of them, I wanted to be in a band. And because I wanted to be in a band, I ended up down this musical career path, which led me to Denver, where I am now, where I met my wife.
That's so awesome.
Dude, do you ever think about that? Like, do you ever think about like every single thing that happens is somehow connecting you to where you're supposed to go? And
Yeah.
there's choices along the way, and there's moments in time where maybe you're not sure what to do, but like they're all like taking you on this sequential path. And whatever people's belief system is, like there's got to be something there, right?
Well, I mean, I have like creator, God, source, whatever people want to believe in. There is definitely something to be said about us living out our mission, our purpose, right? And in that moment, Lewi, you were living out your purpose. You were playing the drums in a band, you were touring, and your wife now was also touring in a band and doing her thing. And you guys met at the perfect moment that it was orchestrated. I mean, you have a choice, right? We have a choice. But I want to say this to you on live on this podcast. That just brought to my head, I got into teaching choir for 19 years in public school, joined RTA Syndicate in 2019 because I heard this guy named Ed Milet in 2019 in January talking on a podcast for the first time. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be on stage with that dude someday.
Yeah.
And next week, because of Lewi and Mike and Angela, I get to be on stage introducing Ed Milet. And I'm divorced now. I'm not in public school anymore. And in those moments, Lewi, it was the worst moments of my life. Like the worst moments of my life. And what you're teaching in the Atlas, what I teach my clients and my students about mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, abundantly being sound, being fit, being a student, a lifelong learner, right? Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for me quitting sports in high school and being a choir teacher eventually, we wouldn't be talking right now. Mm. And so, yes, to your point, like in the moment of the waves and the turmoil and the suck and the uncertainty, it's like, how in the world is my life going to be me on this giant stage in front of thousands of people, helping them find their voice and let their soul come out and say hello? And I'm a public school choir teacher, and I have these visions in my head right now. I don't see it. Mm. Now I see it.
Mm. Woo, man, I just got goosebumps there, dude.
Good.
I didn't know that. I've almost known you for a year now. I didn't know that story.
Yeah.
Dude, wow.
I wanted to tell you that because dude, like, because I got divorced, I still did unmute in New York. Mm. And God said, do it. You got to do this. And this was, she told me August 5th last year, I'm getting divorced. And I was in Vienna at a voice conference. And then unmute was September 22nd. And I was like, God, like, you want me to still do this event? Like, how in the world is this going to happen? And God was like, do the event. So I did the event. I met Angela, and now she's my girlfriend. And if I wouldn't have met her, we would not be in this moment right now.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I don't know how it works.
Well, there's more. Let me just say this one last part, Lewi. All of my experience of building shows, being in public school and just making stuff up and doing these events, and me at pep assemblies, announcing games, like doing football, like all of that training, same thing with you being on stage and being a drummer and all the performance stuff that we know, right? All of that prepared us for a bigger scale thing, which is what we get to do next week.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about it the other day because obviously, my business partner in Atlas, Mike, he is just a workhorse and he's so phenomenal at marketing and branding and selling and stuff like that. And for me, like my strengths is more of my creative side, like I remember, after I moved to the States, I moved here because my brother was here. So my brother came on a road trip to the States and met a girl, ended up staying here in Denver. And we had always made music together growing up. We played in bands together. The guitar. the guitar, and he
Like
sings.
solo
So
guitar or acoustic?
yeah, like acoustic electric guitar. Yeah, so we had always played together in bands at
Dude.
home all the time. So when he moved, I was like, oh man, I can't believe it. And he came out here, so I was like, well, I'm just gonna go. So so I was, and I was like, what? How old was I then? Like maybe mid-20s, something like that. And so I kept coming out for 3 months here for a visitor's visa in the States is 90 days. So I stayed for 90 days. We would make music, record music, see if we could play any shows. And then I'd go home to Scotland. I had to stay for 3 months and I'd just pick up a job. Yeah, I'd just pick up a job wherever, try and make some money to afford a flight to come
This
back.
is awesome.
To come back for 3 months. I must have done that 6-7 times in a row. And by doing that, we started a band here called Saints, and all this different stuff. But the creativity side of it was, I was like, because at that point the Denver music scene was blowing up. Like my wife's band had blown up. They just got signed, and they were national, and they had a huge hit and stuff like that. I just met her, but that's beside the point. But they had blown up. The Fray had just blown up, and there was a couple of different bands that were really, so the Denver music scene was like thriving at that point. And there was so many bands, and it was like, how do we stand out from the crowd here? What do we do? And I was, I've always gone to live shows my whole life. I love seeing live music, and I always remember seeing U2 live a couple times. I've seen them live a couple times, but I saw them live on the pop tour when they had all these massive screens and these huge things going on. And I was like, okay, let's figure something out here. So what I did was, for our live shows, we went to a pawn shop. We bought about 20 old TVs, and I made these like really crappy videos on like iMovie, but they were synced up to a click, and they all synced in time to the music. So now, not just playing drums, in my ears, I had the click tracks in my ears with the music cued. I had some backing tracks going on, and I had the TVs all queued up in Pro Tools. So when we got to live shows, like we would have like a 20-minute set.
Holy crap, Louis.
we would have like a 20-minute set, and everyone else just piles in with their guitars. We're piling in with like 20 TVs, and we just pile them up on stage, and then we played these
awesome.
shows. So it was cool, man, because it did get people's attention, and we ended up selling out the Bluebirds here, like a big theater here and stuff like that. But like I love that process. The creative process is what I love. Like, people always ask me about drummers. They're like, who's your favorite drummer? My favorite drummer is Ringo Starr from the Beatles. And he's not the most technically proficient drummer of all time, but he's so musical and he's so creative. If you actually listen to what he does, there's no one else who could do it. And it's very powerful when you start thinking along those lines of like the creativity sparks everything else. So yeah, when we were talking about doing the live event and stuff, it's like, yeah, the speakers, all this stuff, but and you and I have had a lot of conversations about it's like, what's the creativity here? How do we make this feel different? How do people show up to this and they just get a sense of, oh, something different is about to happen? And like that's everything for me. So if we can make that, which I mean, I say when we make that happen next week, that's it for me, like, so that's my whole thing. If I can get creative as possible, I'm in my happy place.
Yeah, we are definitely kindred souls with that.
Yeah,
like
that's for sure.
I like sitting in that sweet spot of creativity when you're in it and you're like listening to a playlist or finding music, and you're like, for me, it was building act 1 and act 2 of a show. And then looking and seeing the vision on stage, how's this song going to go into this song? And then what's going to happen here? What's the lighting? Like all that stuff. And it's so fun to do this with you. It's like, I've been explaining it like, it's like a WWE set meets entrepreneurs in real estate.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And with the touch of like, I mean, there's soul. Like there's some definite soul moments in there that I'm very happy about, like that we've talked about for like 6 months, just trying to, and we'd throw things back and forth at each other. And that's what I like about the creative process. It's not like, okay, Louis, this is what I'm going to do. Boom.
Yeah.
Take it. No, it's like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I see. This is what I feel. What do you feel? What do you think? What do you see? Because what we know is when you have a group of people that are working like that, that's when the legendary crap happens.
Yeah, and I think you can feel it if you go to events. I mean, I've been at plenty of events, real estate events, entrepreneur events, and you get great information. You can get nuggets of information, but there's just a lack sometimes, and I can't put my finger on it sometimes. But I'm just like, oh, there was no like real soul, like you were saying, like there was no real creativity, like because a lot of people put on events and it's a business model, right? So it's like, okay, we need to put on X amount of events, we need to get this many participants, we need to do all the number side of things. But unless there's a real, I mean, I won't name the name of the event, but you know that event I went to a few months ago to kind of just scope it out. And there were some big name speakers there. And I was like, okay, this should be, and it was like, it felt like tangibly empty. Like there was nothing there, even though like, you know, I'll say one of the speakers, David Goggins was on the stage speaking, and I love Goggins. But even then, I was kind of looking around, and I was like, man, this event just feels just off a little bit, you know? And it's just like, but then I followed this company who does it, and it's like, oh, they're doing like 100 events this year. So, you know, I think...
So it's just another event.
So it's just another event, and I think, you know, this is like our first event we've ever done.
Yeah.
So I think that's allowed us to really get on the creative side and put this together. So, but I mean, I think the other big thing as well is that, you know, with the event, we've brought in speakers to talk about specific things. And in our mastermind, like in Atlas and stuff, like Mike and I, from the start, were like, we're never going to teach on anything that we don't actually know about in practice. Because in real estate, especially, I'm sure in every industry, there's coaches who will just get on and try and teach you everything about the business. And it's like, well, I don't see you actually doing that, or how do you know that, you know? And so it's interesting, and it's worked so well because of that. Like the only things I teach on are productivity, you know, work-life integration, and time management, because that's everything for me. That's how I fixed, you know, that you know, that's, and I'm telling my story on stage at the start of this event, but like that's what happened to me. I didn't have those things, so I completely shit the bed on life. So I had to figure that stuff out piece by piece by piece. But it's why I can teach about it from an authentic way and a position of power, because like, hey, I took this shambolic life and fixed it through doing this. Here you go. So you don't have to go through it. And I think that's why this is going to be so powerful. And Mike's doing the same thing on his side with, you know, with his piece too.
So what, you know, I don't, you could share what you want to share, but.
Oh, I'm an open book, dude.
What happened? Because you met your soon-to-be wife, you moved to Denver, you're kicking booty, you got this new band going. Like, then what happened?
Yeah. So, you know, well, you definitely know 99.9% of musicians don't make it, you know. Like my wife is ultra talented and unbelievable. And
she plays the violin, correct?
She plays the viola and violin. Yeah.
She plays the viola too?
That's our main instrument. Yeah.
That is a hard instrument.
Yeah.
That is one of the hardest instruments.
Yeah. It's funny though. Like I remember when they used to tour, they would sell a bunch of merch, and one of the T-shirts just said, "It's a viola," because everyone's like, "Oh, the violin." I was like, "That's so good." But so, you know, but it was hard to accept, right? I'd played music since I was 10 years old. That was always the dream, was to make it work. And, you know, like at that point, the band was going well. We were talking with HBO about one of our songs being placed in True Blood. So it was like, oh, this is going to happen.
Holy
I was like, this is going to happen. And then, you know, a bit of tragedy kind of struck. Like my nephew, my brother's kid, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And it was like, oh man, what are we going to do here? And they, because of the financial costs, because of everything going on, they decided to move back to Scotland, where, you know, obviously there's the free healthcare there and all that good stuff, right? No matter what you think about what that should look like, that's the facts of the matter over there. So they moved back. They were like, hey, listen, this is like, And I was like, absolutely, dude. Like, that's your kid. Go and take care of it. So they moved back to Scotland. So basically, when he moved back, the band was over. So at that point, I found myself in that same position when he moved to the States. I was like, what am I going to do? But when he left the States, I was married. Mackenzie and I were married at that point. We had Finley. He was like 2, I think, at that time. So I was like, what am I going to do? And at that point, I was working in the fitness industry as well. Like I was, you know.
I didn't know that.
Okay, yeah. So I'm sure people are listening to this like, all right, dude. But I'll try and do it sparingly. So, you know, alongside music, I grew up doing martial arts. So I've always done karate and like kung fu and all this stuff. But basically, I found Brazilian jiu-jitsu and MMA, and I really got into that in a big way. And you know, when I moved over here, I was training all the time, and in our little house that we were renting at the time, I put a wrestling mat in the garage.
Hell yeah!
And I had a heavy bag up in there, had kettlebells, and I would just do my conditioning and training in there. So, but then guys from the gym would just start coming down and working out with me, and it was like awesome. Like I love this. This is awesome. And I would just make workouts and write them up and stuff like that. And Mackenzie was like, why don't you just do that? And because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she goes, why don't you just do that? It's obviously you love it. Like maybe it's not music, but like you still love doing it. You love training and helping people and stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. So I transitioned from music into the fitness industry. And I started doing personal training.
This is awesome.
And opened a couple gyms. Yeah, I opened a couple gyms. And here's the thing with me, like if I find something and it's a character trait with me, and my youngest son has this too. Like if there's something that I'm interested in, I go all the way in, like with no breaks. So I went from like training a couple of the homies in my garage to opening gyms in Denver, building up personal training clients, like having this whole thing going on. And then I got hired by Orange Theory Fitness, and I was working with them, and I was working with their franchisees and stuff like that. So that was all great, and I enjoyed it. I loved it at the time. It was really awesome. I loved teaching classes. I loved helping people on that journey from, you know, where they were to where they wanted to go, and that community piece of it. And the nice thing was, I was never the best trainer on earth, but I always had the best music. Always. Yeah. So when people came to my class, they came because the music was so good. Because people would put on, like, they would just press play on like a radio station, or like there was like fitness apps that had like, okay, RPM disco, and they would just press play, you know. But and Mackenzie will tell you this, every night before my classes the next day, I would create playlists. Like I would spend like an hour to an hour and a half on like, okay, which song has to go here? Okay, well, if I look at the workout, the yeah, dude. I mean, I was getting dialed. I mean, it was chaos, man. I was like, okay, well, the workout, the reps go up here, and it gets a little more. Okay, there's sprints here, so I have to take the beat. I was like, I have to take the BPM.
You're building a show for your workout every day,
dude. And Mackenzie was like, why are you doing this? And I was like, because I want it to be an experience, you know. So I would build these playlists where like it would start and it would consecutively go like this up into the end, where like the last song was like,
I love it,
an absolute beast. So anyway, so I grew up. You know, we put on fitness shows at Red Rocks here in Denver.
Dang, bro.
Yeah, like one of my good buddies, Alex Chapman, he put on with his crew Fitness on the Rocks, and we had like 11,000 people in Red Rocks. We were training them from the stage.
Bro.
Dude, it was wild. I'll send you footage. It was wild.
I want to go there someday. I've never been there.
Red Rocks. Oh, yeah. So Mackenzie, she plays there all the time, you know, because she's a musician for hire. So like any national acts that come through, they always hire string players. Yeah. She's always up there playing. Yeah. So anyway, so the fitness industry was going well, but just like the music industry, it didn't pay. There was no real money to be made, right?
Yeah. And
at that point, you know, at that point we were living in my mother-in-law's basement. At that point, with our young son, you know, we weren't the most responsible with money at that point, because you know Mackenzie had signed a record deal. She'd done all this stuff. She was so successful, and then I came into her life, and I didn't have my permanent residency yet, so I couldn't work. So we lived off this money until it was gone, and you know, it's one of those ones where I used to have a lot of shame around that, but we've dealt with it, and the beautiful thing is, out of that has come what I do now. So basically, we moved in with her mum into the basement with our kids. So now we've gone from like, you know, I'm having this great career in fitness, she's at the top of the charts, all this stuff, to this like basement, right? So like we're in this kind of real kind of poverty defeatist mindset, you know, which is a scarcity mindset, which I was never raised with. So it was a very foreign place for me to be. And I remember distinctly, and I'm actually talking about this in the presentation that we're doing it in Nashville, but there's a date, and I wrote it down. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I came home one day and Mackenzie was in tears, and I always remember it because I was like, what's going on? And she said, we're never going to be able to afford a house.
Oh, man.
And like, yeah, dude, like, oof, even now, like that's a tough one. And, you know, like, she said that because we have friends who were like buying houses, moving into neighborhoods. They seemed like they were progressing, you know, more than we were. And what happened was, inside me at that point, something just went like this. And I feel like when that happens to people, they go one of two ways. They either keep spiraling down and it drags them down and drowns them, or it ignites this flame, right? And that's what it did to me. It ignited this flame. And like, I think it was like the next day, I went out and got another job and another job. And at one point now, maybe 3 months later, I've got 5 jobs at this point.
What?
And I'm out the door at 5 a.m. and I'm home at like 10, something like that.
Lewi.
So, yeah. So just completely switched, right? That whole thing just switched this thing in me that this fire kind of took off. So I was just like, work. I need work. I need work. I need work. I need work. And thankfully there was opportunity for me to do all these things, but like it was just chaos. And then eventually I got, I met someone and they told me, to get into real estate. They were like, dude, you hustle so much, you do all this stuff, you're always working, you've got this crazy work ethic. Get into real estate because you can focus on that and the rewards are like 10x of what you're doing now. And I was like, okay. So I got my license and I got into real estate, and it was the first time I ever made real money. Like in the first 3 weeks of me being licensed, I had made half of what I'd made the entire year before. No joke. And I was like, what's this?
Yeah.
So not only now did I have this addiction to working, but I had this addiction to money as well. So I started chasing this money. Like this was the only thing that was important to me. And the money came in, we bought a house, we did all this stuff. But the person who was present, the person who was fun, the person who was always there in the house, cracking jokes, making people feel good, sharing love, but was broke, was now replaced with the person who wasn't there, but had all this money. So I seesawed this whole thing, right? I seesawed this whole thing.
Oh, Lewi.
Yeah. So now, I'm missing things. I'm not showing up to things.
Yep.
I'm giving out this thing of like, well, I'm doing this for us.
Yep.
Like I'm making this money for us.
Yep.
Which is a complete lie, right? I don't know if you've seen this before. It's called like the curse of man, right? This is what this is. We are so dialed into being providers that we go off the deep end with it.
That's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the number one cause of divorce besides money.
That's what I did.
So I'd seesawed. So I'd become someone who I didn't grow up with that example. My dad was always home. My dad was always present. I didn't grow up with that example. So I'd become this just out of control person surrounded by people who their first love was money.
Money.
Who were chasing it. It was hustle mode, beast mode.
Yep.
Yep. I'd become this person who I didn't like, quite frankly, and I don't think many people did. So this kind of was going on. Thankfully, my wife's a saint, and she stuck by me. But one morning, I woke up, and it was 3. I can't remember the exact time. I wrote it all down the other day. It was 3:20 a.m., something like that. And I woke up, and I had this insane, crushing feeling, like this, like pressure that was crushing me down. and I was it was hard to breathe. And I remember just like sweating and just feeling this complete anxiety. And I was like, what is happening right now? And I was like, okay, I got out of my bed, went into the other room. I just was trying to control my breathing. I was having a panic attack. Yep. So the root cause of it was that I was losing connection. I was losing connection with my oldest son at that point, who was, we had two sons, we had two kids at that point. Finley, I'm trying to remember his age at that point, maybe 6, maybe 7. And Desi at that age he would have been 4, something like that. But this real sense came over me that like, I'm about to lose it. I'm becoming that guy in the movies at the start of the movie, like in the movie Hook, when Robin Williams is like the worst dad of all time.
Yep. God dang. When they throw his phone off the balcony.
I can't watch that movie, dude. Yeah. That's who I was becoming, right? And you know, if you talk to other people, maybe that's an exaggeration, maybe it's a more of a caricature, but it's what I was feeling for sure.
Yeah.
It's what I was feeling. So, crazily enough, for whatever reason, because I was feeling stressed and panicked, I opened up social media, which is probably the worst idea to do. And but I scrolled down and I saw an ad, and the words in the ad said you can have it all, and it was for a men's group, for men who ran businesses with families. It showed up. I'd never seen it before.
Yeah.
That ad just showed up, and I just clicked it. I registered for this challenge. It wasn't starting yet, and I just kind of forgot about it. And then, you know, I was just like, the next kind of couple of weeks, I was just kept thinking about this thing. I hadn't really taken any action to change things because I was stuck in this like karmic loop of just chaos, right? I couldn't get out of this hamster wheel of sales and chasing it. Anyway, in December that year, I stepped into this like 30-day challenge thing, and it completely changed everything.
Wow.
Just changed everything. The way I operated, the way I connected. And basically, it really showed me that, hey, you can have this all. You can scale a business while being an exceptional father, a devoted husband, have your body in check, dialed in, have your nutrition in place, have a spiritual connection, have time for yourself. Like, you can have it all, but you need to prioritize it all. Like I always talk about it as like, you know, tables, legs of a table, you know. Like if one of them's wobbly, you know, it's a nightmare to try and eat on that table, right?
That sucks.
But that's what, I only had one leg that I was focusing on. So the rest of them were all over the place. So I had to start connecting with every piece of life. And it was like a 2-year journey probably for me to really get in and fix it all. But at the end of it, everyone was like, dude, who are you?
Wow.
Like, you know, how are you become this person? Like my friends were like, dude, how are you disconnected with your kids these days? Like, how are you? People are coming to me for marriage advice.
Wow.
Like like everything changed. And that's
what was the biggest takeaway through the challenge?
The biggest takeaway was I was a liar.
Wow. You had to own that ego and just be like,
well, there's two types of lies. There's lies we say, and there's the lies of omission. And men are great at doing it. We lie to ourselves on a constant basis. And
wow.
The main crux of this whole challenge was stop lying. From now on, stop lying. Just tell the truth. And that was it, you know. And it was like, but it's not just about like telling the truth about, oh, you know, this is a mouse I bought for $50. It's like the story. Like, what's the stories that you're telling yourself, you know? My story that I told myself came from what happened when Mackenzie was like, we're never going to be able to afford a house. My story was, I don't deserve this. Like, I have to change who I am to give these people a better life. I have to, you know, put myself aside. Which, you know, I don't think there's anything traditionally wrong with doing that. We have to make sacrifices for our people, but it was that I wasn't worthy of what I was here for. People like me don't deserve to be in these positions.
Yeah.
You know, growing up where I grew up.
Yep.
and just a lot of stories like that that were inside of me that I hadn't really realized yet. It's like, listen, I grew up on the west coast of Scotland. We don't talk about these things, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't address our feelings. We don't open up and have real conversations. So I'd never done that before.
Man.
So I had to like break down all these walls, all these barriers, and come out of it. And when I came out of it, I just felt light as a feather. So,
well, Louis, this is why you're doing this work right now with people.
This is it. Like, because my wife she's always saying to me, like, you missed your call. And I'm like, what? She's like, you should be a marriage counselor. I was like, absolutely not. But
you're a teacher.
What I think I can be is, again, I think you're best. Ed says it, right? You're best equipped to help the person who you used to be, right?
Yep.
And that's it for me. So when I look at now my industry that I'm in, when I look at you're good. But when I look at the industry that I'm in real estate, there's the person who I was. There's thousands of them, and they're all trapped right now, trying to do the same thing. So my mission is to help break them free of that, and that's it. So that's what I'm here to do. So I'm, now my business models are always shifting and changing because I'm trying to figure out how can I reach the most amount of people with this message to help them break free, so they don't have to spend the 2 years trying to fix it that I did. How can I time warp that into 6 months? So that's what I do now. That's my kind of mission.
We're doing it. You're going to share your soul. You're going to let your soul come out and say hello.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how I found my voice, I guess.
Yeah, man, Louis, we could go longer. I know I have a meeting right now, and I know you do too.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that you are so honest and vulnerable and truthful with your story and who you are, and with your feelings and who you are now. Dude, I'm doing this work because my grandpa committed suicide when I was in high school. He didn't talk about his feelings. My dad drank a lot. He never talked to me. He never said, I love you. I had to tell him, why didn't you say this to me? And so I'm the change in my family tree to make sure that people share their soul and let their feelings out. So thank you for doing your mission and accepting your mission and not giving up, because it could have been easy to give up,
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's powerful, man. No, it's just powerful. I think we need to be having more conversations like this, like,
yeah, let's do it.
This is just in general in communities, like, this is what we need to do. So I love it. I appreciate you having me on, man. Thanks so much.
How could people get a hold of you, Louis?
You can just hit me up on Instagram, is the place I'm always at, just at Lewi Gault. Feel free, just send me a DM, whatever you guys need. I'm always here to help with anything. So any questions, anything you need, resources, just hit me up. I'm here for you. All
right. And I'm gonna try to get this out before next week. So we're gonna clip it up and I'm gonna send it to you and we'll have some fun.
Sounds good, brother.
Louis, thank you. Talk to you guys later.